Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Cables to Clouds fortnightly news episode. So, in this episode today, what we're going to do is go through a few news articles that have come out over the last few weeks that we found interesting. Maybe a little bit of cynicism sprinkled in as usual, but let's hop into it. So, I am your host today. My name is Chris Miles at BGP Main on Blue Sky. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, who I'm running out of adjectives to describe, Tim McConaughey at Carpe-Diem VPN on Blue Sky. So let's go ahead and hop right into the news. So as you may be aware, in the U.S., just in the last couple weeks, we had Google Cloud Next, which is basically Google Cloud's annual conference that they hold. We've put a wrap up in the show notes kind of covering everything that they announced, because that list is quite lengthy, and there's a lot of things sprinkled in there about a two-word acronym that you can probably guess. But we have one announcement out of this that we wanted to touch on, which was the announcement of a service that they must have had a lot of trouble trying to name this thing, called CloudWAN. So, as you know, CloudWAN is already a pretty prominent product offered by AWS, but Google has come to the table offering a similar service called CloudWAN. I will say that obviously the description of this will be in the show notes, but they really focus on two predominant use cases here for Google Cloud WAN. Use case one being high performance connectivity from regional data centers to cloud. So it's leveraging some of their existing services like Cloud Interconnect and Cross Cloud Interconnect, which basically Cloud Interconnect is your means of connecting your on-premises data centers to Google Cloud, and then you have Cross Cloud Interconnect, which is the service you use to facilitate connecting your Google Cloud environment to other clouds like AWS, Azure, etc. And then I believe this is a new service that they've introduced called Cross-Site Interconnect, which is basically like a layer 2 extension between your cloud interconnects. So I'm thinking this is going to be similar to a service like SiteLink or something like that, so that you can have this cross-site interconnect act as your kind of DCI connection between your cloud interconnect circuits. And then there's a use case two, which is about premium tier networking for branch and campus. So this is kind of an amalgamation of a number of services listed in here. So Network Connectivity Center, so NCC, Cloud Interconnect, NCC Gateway, which is kind of that gateway service for connecting NCC to other services, Cloud Next Gen Firewall, Cross Cloud Interconnect, and some other open ecosystems for services like SSE, things like that. So I will say this is not quite what I expected when they announced something called CloudWAN. I thought it would be a little bit more similar to AWS's offering, but I think there is enough differentiation here to be worthy. So yeah, how do you feel, Tim? What are your comments on this?
Yeah, I mean, other than the name being exactly the same, of course. What I find interesting about Google's version of this is that Google's version does seem to be closer to the actual spirit of the word, I guess, WAN in this case, like Cloud WAN. Not so much in the first use case. That first use case seems pretty obvious. You're going to have some kind of high performance connectivity from on-prem to middle mile or to the cloud directly. And this new layer 2 connectivity is going to be definitely, I'm sure, like middle mile circuit stuff, like Equinix or, well, maybe not Megaport, but like Equinix or something. I'm not sure how the layer 2 connect. I guess it depends on whether it's a real layer 2 connection or it's emulated layer 2, like tunnel, right? Q&Q or something like that. But yeah, the use case 2 very much feels like true WAN replacement. At least that seems like, look at the diagram. We'll have it all linked in the show notes. Basically, it has NCC being a central hub to centralize to conglomerate all these services together. So like, Chris was saying, like SD-WAN, and then of course any kind of service that you would expect your branch to want to leverage, right? Instead of going straight to Zscaler or 3 other different SSE providers or something like that, they're saying, why don't you just bring their connectivity to us, and then we'll be kind of the glue that holds the whole thing together, and then you can peel off or add new services. So interesting offer. Definitely, like I said, closer to the whole WAN thing. I am curious to find out who, besides people who already use Google as their primary provider, will actually want to centralize their branch services like this with NCC. Because I mean, NCC by itself, even though this offers a service where, hey, you can bring in all of your branch services and just essentially connect us to your branches with NCC, I still feel like there's a whole big chunk of the cloud piece missing. Not missing, but just like without it, it wouldn't be as strong a value prop on its own.
Yeah, I think we kind of talked about this before we hit the record button, but I think a bit of this kind of relates to how Google does networking quite different than all of the other CSPs out there.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of encouragement from Google is to for customers just have one VPC. Like just have a global VPC deployed across every region that they want presence in, and everything resides in the same VPC. And, that is very different to what you would do in AWS, because you can't even have, subnets that go multi-region or multi-AZ at that comment there. But so like this idea of like leveraging NCC as a true like backbone type thing, it seems nice. I just don't typically see customers consuming cloud in this way.
That's it.
And they obviously there's a lot of commentary in here about how this can reduce TCO up to 40%, which is, we'd have to see some kind of details about that. I'd like to see who's doing that and how they are, which is very possible. But yeah, maybe this will start to shift customers to consume cloud like this, specifically Google Cloud. If Google's your primary cloud, then this may be a no-brainer for you. But very, very interesting offering, I'll say.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're going to need to wait and see who adopts and how they end up using it.
Yep, agreed.
All right. Okay, so now we have a article from Bleeping Computer about it's been all over the news, so I'd be amazed if somebody hadn't seen it already, but the whole MITRE losing funding bit for the CVE program. It just so for those who maybe didn't already know, and I'll dig into the article here in a second, about a week or two ago, I think, maybe 2 weeks now, the MITRE announced basically that that they had lost funding. Well, not lost funding, it just wasn't going to be renewed for the new year. And because of that funding loss, they were no longer going to be able to administrate the CVE program, the Common Vulnerabilities and Exploits, which is kind of the backbone of cybersecurity notification, if you will, right? It's MITRE is a nonprofit. Its whole purpose is, well, not whole purpose, but a large part of its purpose is administrating the CVE program. And that means, that takes money, that takes time, that takes obviously a lot of resources to not only administrate the program, but then provide all of the, websites and everything for it. Anyway, so they lost funding because of the government basically was not going to renew the contract because there's a big surprise there. Luckily, CISA has stepped in. CISA, the government, the government arm, if you will, of cybersecurity. I forget what CISA stands for.
Cybersecurity and Infrastructure
that's
Security
right.
Agency.
Yep, that's it. Could not, just blanked completely out of nowhere on that one. So they've stepped in. They provided an 11-month bridge contract, basically. I am curious what is going to happen after this is over. The 11th month. So actually, I'm kind of curious what's going to happen even before 11 months are over, because, something that basically was the gold standard for the entire world cybersecurity, database has been shown to be essentially vulnerable to the whims of government. So, I was reading another article that maybe we'll include that one. Probably won't cover it, but we might include it in the show notes about how Europe is already standing up its own, CVE type of thing. And we're, here comes the fracturing of that the effort, to the point where CVE won't be the only thing out there. You'll have other ones that track them differently, or God knows how that's going to work when you start assigning a vulnerability that now carries a CVE number and some EU number, and God knows what else kind of number that down the sign. So it's going to be really complicated, man. But yeah, it's absolutely insane to me. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this Bleeping Computer article does briefly touch on at the end that the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, or ENISA, has launched their program that embraces a multi-stakeholder approach by collecting publicly available vulnerability information from multiple sources. So they wanted to kind of be not open source, but you know what I mean, kind of more widespread and not tied to a single entity. My thing is, I don't know, like, maybe this was brought up several times prior to this date, but I feel like I didn't hear jack shit about this until the day that the funding was running out. And like, hey, after today, it's over. Like we have no funding. Like, how in the fuck did it get to the last day before this was like a known thing amongst the community? And like you said, the exact, like the concerning part is that the gold standard for what vulnerabilities exist from a cybersecurity perspective could have been gone like that, like in an instant, just like overnight, and it got extended for 11 months. So you know what, maybe we'll be having the same conversation in on March 16th 2026, but I don't know. It's just like, that's absolutely insane. I actually do need to dive into that and maybe find out how. I want to see all the points in time that led up to this, because I feel like someone should have known this.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, it's not uncommon for government contracts to essentially run their course and then just be renewed. Like, I'm assuming that what happened is that there was an 11th hour, Doge cut or something that impacted this when it was expected to be renewed. I'm thinking that it's the only thing that makes sense, right? Like, otherwise I would assume MITRE would have up until this point been like, hey, we're about to lose our funding. Hey, we're going to lose our funding. Like, it had to have been, oh yeah, of course you guys are going to get funded. We've been funding you, to the point where, and then all of a sudden Elon, I don't know, was tying his shoes or something and saw the words CVE somewhere reflected in a monitor and decided that he had to cut it.
I mean, in that same breath, like, I don't think, if anyone's been watching what's been happening with the administration, I don't think you can assume anything is going to be renewed, right? With the things that they're cutting. So it probably should have used a little common sense there, I think. But, not going to throw stones. I don't know what happened. I'll look into it later and I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, much more lighthearted announcement from the Azure Networking blog. So they have announced, Microsoft Azure has announced the general availability of route maps for Azure Virtual WAN. So huge congrats to AWS, or not AWS, sorry, Azure. Route maps, which is something that has been kind of a staple for network engineering for several years. Probably, what are we going back, like 20 years at this point, maybe more. So basically they've added a route map functionality for virtual WAN. And if you're unfamiliar with route maps, it's basically a semi-complex like condition match and manipulation of route advertisements, where you can set match conditions, you can set actions and things like that. It's very useful for manipulating things like AS paths, or doing summarization, or allowing blocking, adding communities, things like that, which is all pretty much baked into this. Looks like day one. So, very cool to see this. I'm kind of wondering why we didn't see this sooner. This seems like a relatively simple operation. Like, there's route maps in use today that do far more complex things than this. Like Cisco, I think, even has RPL, right? I don't know if that's really in big use still today. The route policy language, which was introduced with iOS XR. Where you can do way more complex stuff, and it's almost like programming for routing protocols. But yeah, cool to see this. Don't know if we'll see increased adoption for VWAN from this, but maybe we will. If you're waiting for route maps to pull the trigger on VWAN, then this is probably a good day for you. But yeah, I don't know. How you feel, Tim?
Yeah, looking at the article, it goes into kind of what they've implemented. And remember that you got to look at all of this through the lens of, you're consuming a service from the provider. The provider actually has access to everything that's possible under the hood. What they're showing you and what they're allowing you to do, that's the thing, right? So route maps are actually extremely powerful and can do a lot more than this article says that they can do. But these are the services that Microsoft has essentially vetted and then made available, created the programming, if you will, the front end and the programming and the back end to make, it so that you can go through their UI or their CLI or API calls, whatever, and actually send these commands that are can make these route changes on the back end underlay, ultimately VWAN Azure routers that exist in a data center somewhere, right? So yeah, so with that in mind, it looks like, hey, they don't offer, certainly they're not, any network person like a CCIE or something would look at this and be like, oh my God, this is barely any kind of route map. But honestly, in the cloud, what else do you need beyond communities, AS path and route prefix filtering? Like, that's all you're probably ever going to need in the cloud. You're not doing anything super complex.
Yeah. Especially with something like VWAN, which already has kind of its own defined route selection and things like that. You don't want to mess with too many things under the hood, or else you're asking for pain, basically.
Right. And so, honestly, the stuff they offered more with this than I thought they would. Like, there's actually some really cool stuff in here. Like, for example, they have a thing with prefix replacement, where this is like, this is not a way a network person would ever think to do it, but essentially this is how you would summarize, right? This is how you could summarize from, say, you receive component routes of 10.000/8, but you only, for whatever reason, want the 10.000/8 to go in. So normally, you would with routing protocols and stuff, you would do this a different way. You would use a summary command under the routing protocol that you're using, like BGP, for example. In this case, they're saying you don't have access to any of that. So here's how you can do that same thing that you would expect to be able to do. So it's a little different, but I gotta say, I'm looking at it and I'm not seeing any extra functionality that's missing that I would have wanted.
Yeah, and I think this kind of comes back to something that we've talked about on the show for a while, whereas cloud has kind of been this environment where you've had people that don't really know networking managing networks, right? You've had developers kind of spinning up VPCs and VNets with the same CIDR ranges over and over and kind of learning the hard way that, things don't function that way. I wonder if some of the language that they've used here, like, kind of replacing route prefixes versus summarizing route prefixes. I wonder if that's just kind of catering to who they think will be managing these environments, which is totally fine. But like you said, I feel like there's some, just kind of my, networking PTSD gets a little triggered when I see just kind of replacing routes with summarized things without kind of strong conditions in there. But to your point, like, they've kind of scaled back the complexity from a networking perspective on what you can really have as far as, loops and things like that. So, I guess maybe this meets the criteria for the environment that it's in. But it's just I'm thinking maybe it's kind of catering to the audience, but I don't know.
Yeah, the one that gives me hives from a networking perspective is the one where you can match and then remove all the AS paths from the path. Like, that just like really messes with me, because I'm thinking like, oh, good, we're going to introduce loops with the, but anyway.
I imagine if you're removing all of them, you're not removing your own, right? You're still going to put the,
I would assume not,
the Azure one is the one, what is it? 1, 2, whatever. Azure has
man, I don't keep it off. Yeah, I don't remember. It's a public one. It's a public AS that I don't remember.
I mean, I don't think they're going to change the rules. Whereas, like when they advertise this outside of VWAN, that they're not going to put their own AS number. That's like a general rule that I think everyone has to follow for it to meet the standard. But yeah, I know what you mean. So that's kind of like if you're a developer and you see that, like, oh, I don't need all these ASNs, I'll just get rid of them. It's like, bad move, buddy. Yeah. So we'll see.
All right, one more, and this one is from TechCrunch. So this one is, yeah, okay. So I'll just roll into it. So the former CISA director, the former director of CISA under Trump, Chris Krebs, basically has been targeted by the Trump administration for a federal investigation, saying that he didn't do enough to. Hang on, I gotta 1 second. Let me bring up the article because it doesn't make any sense to me. He's being targeted by the Trump administration essentially because he failed to prove that the 2020 election was stolen from Trump. It doesn't make any sense. Oh yeah, that's right. It was because he basically debunked the false claims about the about it being rigged in 2020. So I'm so confused.
Yeah, we put this in here just because it said like he was gonna basically resign from his position at Sentinel-1 to challenge this federal investigation, which is just, yeah, the investigation claims that he falsely and baselessly denied the 2020 election was rigged and stolen.
That's right.
When like, I mean, this is a person that like Trump appointed to be the director of CISA during his first term, right? So it was like, and he's like, if anyone's going to have, like, Chris Krebs is a very well-respected person in the world of cybersecurity for the most part. And I guarantee that if he was claiming that there was no, kind of tampering with the election, I imagine he's got he's got evidence to back this up. Whereas the current administration seems to be doing things without a whole lot of, investigation and fact-based evidence on the decisions that they're making. So this just seems like bullying, man. Like, I don't think anything's going to come of it. It's just really kind of maybe a jab at Chris Krebs for something punitive that he did years ago. Yeah, it's crazy.
Notice that they also stripped him of a security clearance. Like, this has happened. This is not just Krebs, right? Like, this has happened multiple times now. This administration is systematically finding people it doesn't like and stripping them of their security clearance. Like there was a journalist. There's some journalists that it was a lawyer. It was a law firm. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. It happened really recently, and they lost their like security clearance and stuff, like just for no reason other than, it was one of the firms that was investigating Trump, for one of the I forget which federal one, if it was the one about misuse of campaign funds or whatever it was. But yeah, they was completely punitive. They had no reason to do it. They just went after him and took their security clearance. So this weaponization is terrifying, right? Because they've just essentially killed that. They could have killed that firm, basically, and maybe they have, because of their clientele might need security clearance to deal with the clientele they have. So we're gonna see more of this, and I don't know what the answer is of how to fight against it.
Yeah, I don't think this has necessarily been like the first domino to fall or anything like that. I think we've already seen several dominoes at this point. This one's just kind of coming from a different direction, but I don't necessarily want to get too political on this show, but this is just insane. Like, it's the administration is venturing too far into the realm of technology for me to be comfortable not speaking up about some of this stuff. So it's just, it's going to get worse, I think, before it gets any better. So I guess we will strap in.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that exciting note, we should probably go ahead and wrap up for the day.
Yeah, so if you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. This has been the Cables to Clouds Fortnightly News Update. Again, we put all of these articles that we covered today into a Google Doc, which is available in the show notes. So if you want to read any more, if you really want to look at what was announced at Google Cloud Next 2025, highly recommend looking in there because we put the full wrap-up link in there. And if you don't already subscribe, hit that little subscribe button. Let us know what you think about the show. Tell a friend about the show, and we will see you again in 2 weeks. Take care.